Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our talks on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons AD&D. In this episode, I'm going to get into talking about encounters and NPCs. So let's just dive into it and start talking about it. Let's talk about encounters. Encounters is a very broad term. It can represent anything from you meeting an NPC, fighting a monster, or discovering some kind of hidden location like a mysterious fountain in the middle of a forest. All of these are encounters, and encounters are run out in various ways from that point in time. So there are two main types of encounters. Planned encounters, which is something that your DM has effectively planned out for you to hit when you reach a certain point in time, or random encounters, where if you're wandering around an area, there's the possibility that you might run into a monster, but it'll be random chance whether or not that occurs. Regardless, once an encounter begins, you have to see if there would be some surprise to it. Now, there are circumstances where there could be no surprise, that you're just having the encounter. Like, you're not going to surprise in a fountain when you're encountering, but should there be more than one set of creatures involved, surprise can occur. When surprise occurs, each side will roll a d10, and on a 1, 2, or 3, that side is part of the surprise. Now, both sides could be surprised, one side could be surprised, both sides could be not surprised. Normally, it can be rolled as a group, but it also can be rolled individually. Like, if it's a group of adventurers, have them roll sort of individually, because especially if they each have their own modifiers, some of your group might be modified, but they're not surprised while others doesn't have that kind of modifiers and would be. On the other hand, like, as the dungeon master, you might just have one group of creatures roll on their own. You know, you would just roll it for them, see about it. So once surprise is determined, a surprising group, the group that's gotten the surprise, they can get a free set of melee, missile, or magic item attacks on this. Not casting spells, but they sort of get a free round of hits on the people that are surprised. Now, the surprised people also have one other type of penalty to themselves, other than getting attacks against themselves just for free. They lose any kind of dexterity bonuses to their AC. So whatever bonus that you had for having a high dexterity gave you to your AC, you lost it because you're surprised. Now, once you're no longer surprised, it goes away and you're back to normal. Now, I will talk about it a little bit in a moment, but you could use surprise to basically avoid an encounter. If I'm part of if all the PCs are part of a group and have managed to get the surprise on another group, they could use that just to avoid that group entirely. They don't need to fight with them. Now, granted, this doesn't work every time, but it's an option. Now, once an encounter begins, your DM is going to tell you the sort of range it's at. They could say they're 100 feet away from you. They could also say they're 20 feet away from you. It depends on the circumstances of what's occurring when this encounter begins. If you're walking in a forest, you're probably going to be closer than if you're walking in an open field. Now, once an encounter begins, there's multiple options. You can, of course, evade. As I talked about just a minute ago, you can be evasive. You can avoid a combat. You can avoid an encounter. You can choose not to do it. You can talk it out. You can try to discuss things with these people. If it's a group of humans, it's more likely that they're going to talk with you than if they're a group of, like, dogs you're encountering. The group of dogs is probably not going to talk things out with you, while the group of humans, maybe. That's going to get down to role-playing more than anything. Then, of course, you can fight. You can do battle. That's the main thing a lot of characters do against monsters and such. When you're fighting monsters or bandits or something like that, you might be more likely to get into a fight with them. Then, of course, you can wait. You can just wait and see what happens. If you haven't been noticed and they're just sort of doing something, you can wait and watch them and sort of decide for yourself. Maybe you're encountering a group of humans and they haven't noticed you, and you don't know if they're friendly or enemies. You could wait and see if they have something that would tell you if they are. Other than those four, there are other things that can occur in an encounter, but that's going to be really your DM's discretion whether one would come up. So it's like there might be another option other than fighting, talking, evading, or waiting. It's going to be very situational and dependent on what your DM comes up with. Now let's talk about NPCs. NPCs is a very broad term. It means non-player character. So if I'm talking about PC, I'm talking about player characters. NPCs are non-player characters. So anything that's an NPC is something that a character would encounter that would be a person, creature, or monster controlled by the dungeon master. So anything controlled by the Dungeon Master you effectively encounter would be an NPC. As I said, it's any person, creature, or monster. Now, traditionally speaking, persons or monsters are going to be the things you really encounter, and most of them, like monsters especially, when you encounter them, you're going to fight them. You know, you're fighting the monsters. They technically are still NPCs, regardless if they're intelligent or not. Persons you meet are probably going to be intelligent. You're still going to encounter them, and they're still going to be NPCs. So it's just a broad term for pretty much everything else in the world other than your characters. Now, there are 3 types of NPCs which are going to be important to your players. The first is, of course, hirelings. Hirelings are like a classification of NPCs that you basically pay money to in order to get a job done. They give a good list of jobs that you would pay hirelings for. And the thing is, they have a salary, you want to treat them well, or they're going to leave you because they're not your slaves, they're people you're paying money to do something for you. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to do whatever job you hired them for. Now, that's something, it's basically you're paying people money to do stuff. And you can do that a lot. You could pay someone to be like random foot soldiers to help you out. You could pay a tailor to go around with you and fix your clothes all the time. It's an option. A little silly, a little waste of money, but an option. Now, the amount of money you're going to have to pay a hireling varies between kind of the job they have. If you have someone that's going to be going into combat for you, you're probably going to have to pay them a lot more than someone that's just fixing up your clothes or cooking your food. Now, after that is followers. Now, followers are a step up from hirelings. Followers have loyalty to you to a degree. They've come to you as a player because they've got some kind of reputation or heard about you and think you're worthy of them following. Now, of course, they can't necessarily do this for free. You still need to treat them well. You still probably have to pay them something because they need to live. You know, they're not just doing this because they can. They're doing this because they would want to, and they hear, like, you know, maybe they would get a cut of something for helping you out. So again, it's a step up in loyalty, but it's still, you might still have to give them something. It's just, there's not like a contract either. You no longer have to worry about if you miss paying them for something, the contract running them out and they're going out. A follower might be more willing that, you know, should something happen and you couldn't get them money a week or something, they might be willing to let it slide until next time you could pay them, the sort of thing. Things like that. You still have to treat them well, and as long as you're treating well, they're probably not going to resist this. The only thing about followers that's different than hirelings is should you lose a follower, you don't get it replaced. Someone doesn't fill in that place. You never get it back. It's just like you can always hire a new hireling. Followers, once they're dead or gone, they're gone for good. Now, there are some classes which can attract more interesting followers, like magical beasts or animals, but that's dependent on your class, depends on what you kind of follow. And the last type of character you can get are henchmen. Henchmen are a type of NPC that are very hard to get. But once you get a henchman, it's effectively, they're pretty much willing to get into situations they might die for you. They're the most incredibly loyal. They're probably not going to ask anything from you. They'd be willing to take it if you wanted to, like, give them money or something to live, but they're not going to ask for anything like that. They're the kind of people that are just like following you for the sake of following you. You're more their master than anything, but you know, it's sort of like, oh man, you're so cool. I will be loyal to you to the ends of the earth. He's the henchman you have. Now, henchmen are never going to be anything more than one level lower than you. That means that's the highest level they can be, is one level less than you. And the henchmen have their own set of rules that you can look in the book to look at if one should come up, either if you're the dungeon master or player. Now, the other thing I have to talk about just briefly is that there are obligations you would have if you have one of these 3 types of NPCs under your sort of wings. The book talks about these obligations that you as a player would have to do to basically keep them in your good graces and keep them under your purview. It varies depending on it. Like a henchman, you're probably going to have to treat, you don't have to treat as well as you have to treat a hireling to keep him basically wanting to work for you. You know, a henchman, you don't have to do a lot to have him want to work for you. While the hireling, he might get, like, if he's in a lot of danger and stuff, might get pissed off at you and decide, this job sucks, I'm gone. You know, a follower, that's a little harder. It's in the middle of that, too. But anyway, so that's it for today. I talked about the basics of encounters, and I talked about the basics of hirelings. If you have any questions or comments, anything you want to say, anything I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like this video if you enjoyed. Show support for the channel and the Empire, and for the work I do. Please Subscribe if you already haven't. We're always looking for more members, more citizens of the Empire. And please share this video. If you know anybody who learned anything from it, or wouldn't just enjoy watching it, please share it with them. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.